Hello, this is Professor Kuehn, and welcome back to my lectures on electricity, magnetism, and light, where we've been studying the work of Christian Huygens, his treatise on light. In my last lecture, we talked about how Huygens was going to address the issue of why some substances are opaque and others are transparent, using, of course, his wave theory of light. Now, in this lecture, what I'd like to do is explain how he approaches the topic of refraction of light. Remember, everyone was aware at this point, at least the scientists were aware at this point, that the light, when you have light incident upon some kind of transparent medium, such as if it's coming from air going into glass, the path of the light ray bends. That is, light rays bend in going from one medium into another. This is captured by the law of refraction, or Snell's law, which you might remember is n1 sine theta 1 equals n2 sine theta 2. In other words, there's a relationship between the properties of the materials and the angles of incidence and refraction. This is illustrated on page 193 in a student's guide to the great physics texts in figure 16.1. where we show an interface between two types of materials. That interface is denoted by the line FG. The light coming into that material comes along a line AB. When it strikes the material, it bends and it follows a new trajectory along the line BC. And there's a relationship between the line segment AD, which is a sign of the incidence, and the line segment EC, which is a sign of refraction. How does Huygens approach this using his wave theory of light? This is illustrated on page 194, figure 16.2. Here we have a block of glass, let's say, and you have an incoming ray of light that can be represented by wave fronts that are coming in. So the line segment AC would be a wave front at any particular moment in time. And as it moves downward and toward the right, a moment later, it is a wavefront at location KL. A moment later, it is at the next line segment KL, and a moment later at the next line segment KL. And what he's going to try to demonstrate geometrically is as it moves downward and to the right, the wavefronts that are propagating through the glass are represented by lines OK, and then OK later, and then OK later. In particular, there's a bending of these wavefronts. So one way to think about this, I want to present a couple of ways to think about this. First of all, you might think about this in terms of when you're driving in an automobile. So don't think about light for the moment. Think about when you're in an automobile and you're driving in your automobile and suddenly you're going along the freeway and God forbid the left front wheel pops. It deflates very quickly. What happens to the trajectory of your car? Well, if the left front wheel pops, what happens is the left side of your car slows down, and as a result, you swerve toward the left. That's because the left side of the axle of the front wheels is going slower than the right side, and that causes you to swerve in the leftward direction. Likewise, if the right tire popped, you'd swerve toward the right. That's kind of what's happening here. If you think about this wavefront coming in and striking this glass block, if the part of the wavefront that strikes the block suddenly moves slower than the part of the wavefront that's outside of the block, that causes a bending of the wavefront or a swerving of the wavefront. That's what's happening. Whereas you have a wavefront coming in along AC, after it hits the glass block, now a moment later it's represented by the line OKL, kind of a bent wavefront. And if you look at the direction that this wavefront is traveling, it's no longer traveling in the direction it had been going. It's traveling in a slightly different direction. Okay, so we could go through this geometrical proof that he does, but what I like to do is approach it in a slightly different way. This is also going to be a geometrical proof, but if you go on to the figure on page 200, this is figure 16.5, I want to walk you through a way of deriving Snell's law from the wave theory of light. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sketch of this image and walk you through this problem. Let's imagine this is the surface of a glass block. So we have a separation here between glass and here, which is air. And I'm going to draw the trajectory of a ray of light as it approaches this glass block. So I'll draw a couple of regions of this ray. They're both moving downward in this direction. And let's suppose that the velocity of light in the air, I'll call that v1. That's the speed of light in the air. And I'm going to draw a few of the wave fronts which are perpendicular to the ray propagation direction. So think about these as the regions where the ether is compressed. Okay, and just so we're sure about this, let me draw here. This is the wavelength, lambda 1 is the wavelength of the light in the air. Okay, now here is the thing that Huygens is going to hypothesize, is that when the light goes into the glass, it's going to slow down. And so the trajectory is going to change by a bit. So I'm going to draw the direction that the light is traveling after having gone into the glass. And because the light is going to be bending, the wave fronts themselves are also going to be bending. So I'm going to draw, again, once again, these parallel lines representing the wave fronts after they have gone into the glass. Okay, so I'll maybe draw a couple more like this. Okay, so notice the wave fronts, once they hit this, they slow down, and notice that they come closer together. So there's going to be a new wavelength inside of the glass, and I'll call this wavelength lambda 2. So lambda 2 is the wavelength of the light inside the glass. Okay, and let me draw a couple of other things here. I'm going to draw a vertical line here, a perpendicular or a normal to the surface. So this right here, we'll call that theta 1. That would be the angle, that angle right there is the angle of incidence. And then this angle right here, that's theta 2, would be the angle of refraction. And what we're going to do, the goal, is we're going to show that the angles of incidence and refraction obey Snell's law. And all we're going to do is assume that the speed of light in the air is different than the speed of light in glass. So we'll say V2 is the speed of light in the glass. So all we need to assume is that we've got these wave fronts that are perpendicular to the direction of travel, that there is some bending, so that there's a different angle of incidence and angle of refraction, and that we're going to be able to show that those angles are related by Snell's law. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, the first thing we want to do is demonstrate that there's a relationship. If there's a different speed of light in air and in glass, that's going to lead to a different wavelength in air and in glass. It's represented schematically here, but what is that relationship between the wavelength in air and in glass? Well, we know that the velocity in air is equal to the wavelength in the air times the frequency of the light. That's a relationship we had derived a couple of weeks back. And we also know that the velocity of light in the glass is equal to the wavelength of the light in the glass times the frequency of the light in the glass. Notice here in this formula that I'm putting subscripts for the velocity, indicating there's a different velocity in air and glass, and subscripts for the wavelength because there's a different wavelength in air and glass. But notice that I've left the subscript off of the frequency. That's because the frequency of the vibration does not change in air and in glass. This might not be obvious to you why this is, but I'll give you maybe one way of thinking about this. If you think about a particle that's right on the edge between the air and the glass, and as the waves come from above and make it vibrate back and forth, there's going to be some frequency with which it vibrates because of the incident light from the outside. But if this is on the boundary between the air and the glass, that must also be vibrating at the same frequency as the waves that are propagating into the glass. And since any particle that's right on the border cannot be vibrating at two different frequencies, after all, it can only be in one place at a time, right? Therefore, it must be vibrating at the same frequency due to the waves hitting it from the air and the waves leaving it going into the glass. Therefore, the frequency of the light does not change across the boundary, although the wavelength changes and the velocity changes. If you don't quite buy that, that's okay. I'm just letting you know that that's the case, okay? All right, so if this is the relationship here between the velocities and the wavelengths, we can form a relationship between the ratio of the velocities, V2 is to V1, in the same ratio as lambda 2 is to lambda 1. That is simply by dividing the bottom formula by the top formula. Okay, so this is going to be an important relationship between the wavelengths of the waves going into the glass and the wavelength of the air of the light in the air, and it's related to the speeds in the air and the glass. Okay, there's another piece of information that we're going to need to use, and that is the definition of what's called the refractive index. The refractive index of a material is a ratio of the speed of light in a vacuum to the speed of light in that material. That's the definition of refractive index. So again, this is the speed of light outside of a medium, outside of any medium. I guess Huygens would call it the speed of light in pure ether. And this would be the speed of light in a medium, like glass. Okay, so notice then that we can form, and likewise N1 would be the speed of light in vacuum or outside of a medium to the speed of light in that medium. When we use these formulas right here, we can form the ratio, so I'm kind of going over here now, N2 over N1. Notice if we form these ratios, then it's going to go inversely as a ratio of the velocities, V1 over V2. So this is using these two, we arrive at this formula right here. All right, and now notice that we can combine this formula. Maybe I'll call this formula right here smiley face, and call this formula right here frowning face. And we can combine those two formulas. We can eliminate the velocities to get a relationship lambda 2 over lambda 1 is equal to, well, lambda 2 over lambda 1 is V2 over V1, and V2 over V1 is N1 over N2. Okay, so basically by combining these two formulas, we get this formula. It's a relationship between the refractive indices and the wavelengths. Okay, so far so good. Now we're gonna have to use a little bit of geometry. So let's, I'm gonna give myself a little bit more real estate here. I'm going to indicate a few angles right here, and let's call this angle right here beta, and let's call this angle right here, I know this is kind of small, delta. And also notice that this is a 90-degree angle because the wave front is perpendicular to the direction of travel, and likewise this is a 90-degree angle because the wave front once again is perpendicular to the direction of travel. Now notice that the sine of beta is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. Well, the opposite here is just the wavelength of the light in the air. So it's lambda 1, that's the opposite side. That's this length right here. That's the distance between two wavefronts, that's lambda 1, over hypotenuse, and the hypotenuse is just this blue line segment right here. So I'll put hypotenuse right here. Also notice that sine of delta, that's the sine of this angle right in here. That's going to be opposite. That's this right here, which is lambda 2 over the hypotenuse, which is also the same blue line right here, the hypotenuse. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide sine of beta by sine of delta. And when I do that, the hypotenuses cancel out and I get lambda 1 over lambda 2, right? Move this over to the other side. Okay, actually let me see. Yeah, I'll get rid of it. Okay, so I'm at sine beta over sine delta is lambda 1 over lambda 2. And now notice that lambda 1 over lambda 2, I can use my formula relating the refractive indices. So I can say sine of beta over sine of delta is equal to lambda 1 over lambda 2, which is N2 over N1. Okay, we're almost where we want to go in deriving Snell's law, so let's create some real estate up here. Now, I want you to notice one other thing, that this angle beta, if you look at this, it's the same thing as theta 1, because this triangle right in here is going to be similar to this triangle right here. So sine beta is the same as sine theta 1, so I can write this as sine theta 1, and sine delta, likewise, is the same as sine of theta 2. And that is going to be equal to N2 over N1 now. And lo and behold, we have now arrived at a point where we have Snell's law, N1 sine theta 1 equals N2 sine theta 2, which is Snell's law. Okay? So what we've just done is we've demonstrated that if you have light waves traveling through air, striking a glass surface, slowing down so the velocity changes and hence the wavelength changes, that the angle of incidence and the angle of refraction are related by Snell's law. In other words, it follows logically from the wave theory of light. So what Huygens has done here then is, and we have done, is demonstrated that the wave theory of light implies Snell's law. Okay, so why don't we stop there? Next time we are going to talk, we'll probably finish up chapter 16, and then we'll talk a little bit about chapter 17 and how the law of refraction leads to the bending of light rays going into the Earth's atmosphere.